Hello everybody, welcome back to my MCU tier list. This is part 2 where I place the movies in phase 3 of the MCU into their tiers. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so we're going to start off with Captain America Civil War, and I'm putting it in S tier. Of course, that's an easy one. I mean, this is just an awesome movie. I mean, it has Spider-Man in it. It introduces us to MCU Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man. That was just so awesome to see. I mean, I remember when I think the second trailer of the movie came out, and you see Spider-Man at the end of it, and everybody went crazy, like, oh my god, we're finally getting Spider-Man in the MCU. I mean, that was such a great moment. And so, that right there, I think we'll put it in S tier, introducing us to MCU Spider-Man. Yeah. But, I mean, everything else about this movie is great also. I mean, sure, it may not be a great Captain America movie, like, in terms of being a Captain America movie. It's very much, it's less of Captain America 3 and more Avengers 2.5, but that does not mean it's not a good movie. It's still a great movie, and I think in some ways I like it better that it's not, they didn't try to make just another Captain America standalone movie, because with where the MCU was at that time, it really wouldn't have made sense to be like, oh, Captain America's gonna do something on his own. Like, no, he was with the Avengers, to set up, the Avengers headquarters in upstate New York. It made sense to have all of the rest of the Avengers in this movie too, and it was awesome that, they did the Civil War plotline. I think they did a good job setting up, that conflict, and, they did a really good job at making the sides that everybody chose make sense with their character. It may not be the one that, like, the choices they make may not be what you would initially think they would do, but they make sense within the character. And I think, one of the characters that I think shows us the best is Black Widow, where I feel like you wouldn't initially think she would, be the character that will, choose the Sokovia Accords side of it, but it kind of makes sense with her character. And then, like, once you get into, like, seeing she ends up switching sides, like, that even makes sense with her character, kind of switching allegiances. It just makes sense with her character to do that, even though it may not be the thing that you'd initially be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what she's gonna do. It makes sense with her character that she would do that. And that's kind of with all of the characters. Like, it really makes sense why all of them choose the side that they do. And so I think they did a really good job with that. And I think they did a really good job showing the split in the team, showing something that, would split the team, and especially, like, that final, that final battle between Captain America and Iron Man when, Tony finds out that Bucky killed his parents. That is a brutal fight where you really feel it, and you're like, you're just seeing this team break, this friendship break, and it's just something that you're just like, this is not going to be easily mended. The airport scene, I mean, come on, the airport fight sequence is amazing. Seeing all the heroes fighting each other in the airport, it's a lot of fun. Again, you get to see MCU Spider-Man introduced here. You also have AntMan in the mix, and Black Panther. It's a lot. It's a ton of fun. It's a lot of fun to see all of them fighting the airport. So that's definitely one of the greatest fight sequences in the MCU. And yeah, I mean, this is easily an S tier film. It just does everything so right. I mean, okay, yeah, there's a little bit of some plot holes with Zemo's plan. It's like, there's some plot holes with it, but it doesn't change the fact that this is a ton of fun, a really great movie that always puts a smile on my face, and I think I like a little bit more than Winter Soldier. I think just because it has all the rest of the Avengers in it. Um, you get introduced to MCU Spider-Man, and you get Ant-Man in the mix. I think that just makes it a lot of fun. Whereas Winter Soldier may be a better film objectively, this is definitely a lot more fun of a film, and I really enjoy it. So easily comes in at S tier. But now we'll do Doctor Strange, which I'm gonna put in A tier. I think it's a very good origin story for Doctor Strange, introducing us to this world of magic in the MCU, and showing I mean, it's very Iron Man esque. Uh, I will admit, and I think that's something that kind of draws the movie back a little bit, where you're kind of doing the same arrogant guy loses everything and then gets a change of heart and becomes a better person by the end of it. But still, I mean, I think that is a good storyline, and I think it works a little bit because I think that is sort of the point is he is supposed to be very similar to Tony Stark, and that even goes into their interactions in Infinity War and Endgame, where you really see that they're very, very similar characters, and they're butting heads a lot because of that. Um, I mean, I think it works. I think it works. I think some people have complained that it is exactly. I mean, it's pretty much just Iron Man, just with Doctor Strange and with magic. But I don't see that as an issue. I think it works very well. And I think they do a good job introducing us to the world again. Um, you know, I mean, I love at the end of it the whole Dormammu, I've come to bargain thing, the time loop. I think that was a really cool way of having him beat the villain. Because I think I I like that it wasn't just using magic as combat to beat the villain. It was like using a smart use of the magic of time travel of time loops to beat the villain. I really enjoy what they did there, and I'm definitely very excited for Multiverse of Madness this year, where I think that's just going to be a movie that is going to take whatever this movie didn't do well. Like, I think this movie is great, but I think it's going to take the criticisms that it does get of being this kind of generic origin story, basically Iron Man, but with Doctor Strange, and it's going to really, now that you've set up the character, the world, the magic, you know, now you could really have all the fun with it that I think, that's where this movie really shines, and I think in Multiverse of Madness, now that you don't have to get, you don't have to do the origin story stuff, you can really just have all the fun you can have with this premise of it, with all this sorcery, the magic, the stuff, exploring the multiverse. I'm definitely very excited for that. But talking about this movie, yeah, I mean, it does a good job with the magic, and yeah, I think it's an A tier film. So now we'll move on to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which I'm going to put in B tier. I really enjoy this movie a lot, but I feel like it's definitely a lot funnier than the first one. I think the jokes, you know, I think there's definitely it's definitely a movie that when I watch, I'm laughing straight through it. I think there's just so many jokes thrown in there, but I think that's kind of what holds it back for me, to be honest, because I think where the first one had the humor and the heart kind of balanced really well, this one kind of tips the scales and makes it humor, you know, a ton of humor and a little bit less heart. Of course there is heart to this film, with the whole Yondu thing. he may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy. Like, I mean, yeah, that's great. That's great. That is, they have some heartfelt stuff in here, but I think, the heart of, compared to the heart that the first one had, this one doesn't have as much, and it really just feels like you're just going from joke to joke to joke. Even some of the jokes I feel like are a little bit, uh, like they're not as clever, and so, well, I really thoroughly enjoy this movie. I do have to admit, like, the premise isn't as good. It doesn't have as much of the heart of it. Uh, it focuses way, way more on the humor, which again I like, but it kind of, it goes a little bit too much with it. Where I wish it had a little bit more of the heart that the first one had, and so, um, I think it goes in B tier because it has flaws. I thoroughly enjoy it, but I do have to admit it isn't as good as the first one, and it's a B tier film. But now we're going to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming, which I'm going to put in A tier. The first MCU Spider-Man movie in the MCU. That was redundant. But, yeah, I think it's really good. I thoroughly enjoy it. Yeah, I do recognize the complaints about, relying a little bit too much on Iron Man, but that's also the point. Now that we've seen No Way Home, we kind of realize that's the point. He's supposed to be, he's not supposed to be Spider-Man yet. He's just kind of getting his start, and at this point in his character, he's relying a lot on Iron Man. So even then, even with the complaints, oh, he relies too much on Iron Man. I mean, he doesn't really that much in this movie. He does kind of do his own thing a lot of the time. So I think the complaint that he relies too much on Iron Man, it doesn't really hold that much weight, actually, when you think about it. I mean, actually, that's kind of the point of the movie, and I mean, really, like, is if you're nothing without this suit, you shouldn't have it. In the final battle, he gets the suit taken away, he gets the Stark tech taken away, and he has to beat Vulture on his own, with his own, his homemade suit, his own webs, his own everything, just with his skills. So, yeah. I think this is great. I think Vulture is a good villain. Uh, I mean, that reveal that he is Liz's father, that moment where he opens the door and you're like, wait a second, he's Liz's father. Oh, I mean, that is such a great reveal of the identity of a character, of the villain. That is such a great moment. And how, you see, once again, you have the constant thread throughout MCU movies of a personal connection to Peter Parker, which actually isn't in Far From Home now that I think about it. Yeah, Mysterio doesn't really have connection to Peter Parker, but pretty much every single MCU character or Spider-Man villain in all the other Spider-Man movies has a personal connection to Peter Parker. That's kind of the thing that makes it interesting with Spider-Man villains, is that they're not only, a connection to Spider-Man, but they're very often also have connection to Peter Parker's personal life. And you see, it's revealed the Vulture's personal connection, his girlfriend's dad. Yeah, that's a great moment. So, I really thoroughly enjoy this. It's awesome to see MCU Spider-Man finally in the MCU, and this is the first movie, his first standalone movie with it. So, yeah, it is an A-tier film in my book. But now, Thor Ragnarok, which I am putting in A tier. It is a hilarious movie. It's really just, I mean, it is a movie that, if I want to watch a movie that's going to make me smile and laugh throughout the entire thing, it's gonna be this movie. I mean, it's hilarious. They really just took the Thor character and just did such a good job. They looked at what they did wrong in Thor and Thor the Dark World. They just improved on everything, and they made Thor hilarious. I think it's great. I think it's a movie that is so hilarious. Puts a grin on my face every time I watch it. I'm laughing hysterically at all of the funny moments, and it's just it's a great movie. And I think at the same time, I think the whole Asgard is not a place; it's a people message storyline thing. I think I really like that idea, uh, and I think Hela's a pretty good villain. I don't think she's that great. I think she's better than the other two Thor villains. If we're looking at Thor villains, she's definitely the best one, even though she still isn't that great of a villain when you really look at it. At least you know they give her some motivation, some backstory to where you're like, you kind of understand, uh, where she's coming from, but still, it's not that great. I think having Hulk in this is hilarious. I mean, that scene where he's introduced and Thor's like, yes, we know him. He's a friend from work. That is hilarious. It is great. And then the moment where Bruce Banner jumps off the ship and plops on the Rainbow Bridge because he thinks he's going to turn into the Hulk, and then he eventually does. But that moment where he just flops on the Rainbow Bridge is hilarious. Like, I just. Again, this is a movie that I think just makes me laugh hysterically, even thinking about it. Even more when I'm actually watching it. I mean, it's great. It's a great movie. So yeah, definitely goes into A tier. It is hilarious. A tier. But now we'll move on to Black Panther, which also goes in A tier for different reasons. Whereas Thor Ragnarok, I put in A tier because it's hilarious and ridiculous and kind of stupid. This one goes in A tier because it's this really well-crafted story, great visuals, great world building, great characters. I mean, it is awesome. It is a really great film. Really, part of the reason that this movie is great is because the villain Killmonger is a character that, he's a villain that you really understand where he's coming from. His plan, what he's trying to do, isn't a bad idea. Just the way he's going about it is terrible. And so you create this situation where T'Challa stops Killmonger from, doing his plan, but, doesn't just go back to how things were before. He takes what Killmonger had said to heart, and he makes, he improves on what Killmonger was trying to do, and he does it the right way, not by, giving weapons to everybody and creating, this, like, violent way of doing it, but doing this peaceful way of making connections and, helping the rest of the world, giving the rest of the world their resources. It is a great movie that tells a really, a really great story with, again, great visuals, great characters, great world building, and I think that this is something that is very special, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. It really is sad that, Chadwick Boseman had, passed away, and we don't get to see him in this role longer. It's really tragic, but I really hope that they're able to make the best of it and, you know, create this story in the next movie that uh, is still just as good as this one, even though you've lost really one of the things that made this movie great was Chadwick Boseman's performance as T'Challa. So yeah, I mean, this movie's great. It does everything great on so many levels, and it easily comes in at A tier. But now move on to Avengers Infinity War, which of course goes in S tier. I mean, it is really the culmination, or at least the first part of the culmination of the entire MCU, where you get everybody coming together to fight Thanos. And I do have to say one thing that I think holds this movie back a little bit is the fact that since you have so many characters in it, so many things going on, it does feel a bit, like, a bit cluttered. I think they do the best that they possibly could with it, but, I feel like it is kind of impossible to, for this not to feel a bit too cluttered and a bit too rushed. It feels like you're just, from the very start of it, you're just sprinting through everything. But at the same time, you feel like there's stuff that, there's like too much time between, returning to storylines. Like, definitely the biggest example of this is how you start out, very, very early in the film, you get the whole thing with Iron Man and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, getting, uh, you know, going into that ship that Ebony Maw is on, uh, and then you really don't go back to that for, like, 30 minutes, like, really, like, 30 minutes of the movie go by, and then you're like, you finally go back to that plot line, and you kind of forgot that even happened in the same movie, so, stuff like that kind of draws the movie back, where it just feels like you're just sprinting throughout the whole thing, and you really don't get a moment to really just stop and, take a breath. I think that Endgame fixes that a bit, which is why I like it more. I'll get to that when I talk about Endgame, but yeah, I think that this movie, it's great. I can't deny the fact that it is so awesome to see all of the heroes together, seeing the Guardians of the Galaxy interact with Iron Man and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, and even earlier than that, seeing them interact with Thor. It's just a ton of fun to see all these characters together, and I think that the ending of this movie is one of the greatest endings of a movie ever, because it's so surprising when you watch it and you realize they just lost. Thanos just snapped and killed half of the universe, and you're seeing all the heroes turn to dust. You see Spider-Man, oh my god, the whole, I don't want to go, Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. That was acted so well on Tom Holland's part. Like, I have to admit, when I was watching for the first time, I was tearing up with Spider-Man's death. It was just like, oh my god, they just lost. What the heck? And yeah, it's definitely one of the best endings of a movie ever. Of course, then after that, there was the pain of having to wait a year between this and Endgame to see what happens next, how they fix it, but yeah, it was so great, that ending. It's just, they lost. It's so surprising, and so, I think that this is a movie, it is very great, definitely an S-tier film, but I do have to admit, it does feel a bit too cluttered and, a bit too, like, a bit like you're sprinting through it without really taking any breaks to really breathe. So yeah, this movie definitely goes in S tier. But now we'll talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I'm going to put in A tier. This movie gets a lot of hate. it is another one of these MCU movies that I think gets way, way too much hate. I think it is a really great film. It's hilarious. I think it does a good job exploring the quantum realm and, this idea of, being able to rescue the mother, which was in uh, set up in the last movie when you find out that Hope's mother helped Hank. She was the Wasp, and she ended up getting trapped in the quantum realm, and that's resolved here, where they're able to rescue her from the quantum realm. I think that is such a great, such a great idea. It's something that really I think was the clear next step after the first Ant-Man. When you set up that idea. Oh, the mother was trapped in the quantum realm, and then you have Scott get trapped in the quantum realm and come back. It was definitely the clear next step. The clear logical next step would be we can save the mother. We can get her out of the quantum realm. How do we do that? And I think it's great that this movie does that. And I will admit, Ghost, they could have developed her a little bit more. She's another one of those MCU villains that isn't really that great. But I think still, there's just so much about this movie that I really love. I think it's really hilarious. I think it does a good job with, again, exploring the quantum realm, this concept of being able to save the mother, this whole thing of trying to get the lab. I think it's great, and I think the post-credit scene the mid-credit scene, the post-credit scene is the Ant-Man playing the drums. That's kind of disappointing. But the mid-credit scene where Ant-Man is trapped in the quantum realm, and Hank and Hope and Hope's mother, Janet, they turn to dust, and he's trapped. Ant-Man's trapped in the quantum realm. And I think it just sets up Endgame well to where, it sets up the quantum realm as this thing that can be used in Endgame as, the way that they time travel to get the stones and save everybody. Yeah, I really enjoy this movie a lot. But now move on to Captain Marvel, which I'm going to put in B tier. I enjoy this movie quite a bit. I think it's cool to see de-aged Samuel L. Jackson in this movie. I think Talos is definitely the best character. I think as soon as he's introduced, as soon as it's revealed that the Skrulls aren't bad, and Talos becomes this character that you're just like, he's hilarious. It's great. It is great. Then the whole thing with the Flurkin. Okay, I'll admit that's one of the things that draws this movie back is the fact that the Flurkin scratches out Nick Fury's eye. That's the big reveal. Oh, he got his eye scratched out by a cat. Sure, it's a Flurkin, but he got his eye scratched out by a cat. That's very anticlimactic for this. It's hilarious, but it's really that's the thing we've been building towards. That's the thing we've been this whole time. Oh, last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye. This whole mystery of how did he lose his eye, and it's just a cat scratched it out. Again, sure, it's a Flurkin. The scratch, maybe it does more damage than actual cat, but the visual is a cat scratches out Nick Fury's eye. That's what we see happens. Yeah, so that's a bit disappointing that that's the big reveal of how Nick Fury lost his eye. Also, some things that holds this movie back that makes me not enjoy it that much is, I don't know, I just think that the whole, reveal that, oh, the Kree are actually bad and the Skrulls are good, doesn't really work that well. on a lot of levels because, one, the Skrulls not being bad kind of ruins a whole secret invasion plotline that you could do later. I mean, I guess they are going to do something that will allow them to do that because they're going to make a secret invasions thing. I think later this year that's going to happen. So they're going to do something that'll allow you to do secret invasions with the Skrulls, but it's like you already had them as being the bad guys, and then you turn them good, and now you have to create something that'll turn at least some of them bad again to do a secret invasions thing. That's a bit weird. And then it's also weird on the Kree side, because we've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, so we know that the Kree aren't good. So it's like, it's not that big of a reveal in this movie to be like, oh, the Kree, they're actually the bad guys. Like, yeah, we know. We've seen Guardians of the Galaxy before. Like, we know the Kree are bad. So it's not that big of a reveal. And so it was more of just a confusing thing of like, wait, why are the Kree good now? I thought they were bad. And then it's revealed that it's exactly what you thought they were the whole time. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. So it's one of those things that I feel like they were trying to make this big reveal, but it just doesn't work because you're using things that we already have knowledge about. You know, in the MCU, we know about the Kree, and then outside of the MCU with the Skrulls, you would know from the comics that they're supposed to be the bad guys. And even if you haven't read the comics, if you look up, if you looked up any information about the Skrulls before watching Captain Marvel, you would know that they're the bad guys in the comics, and so it's just weird the way they handled that, and I don't think that the big reveal necessarily works all that well. But again, if that reveal didn't happen, we wouldn't get Talos being hilarious. So it's kind of like, yeah, they kind of made a bad reveal, but we also got Talos, who's great. So, I don't know. It's like a bittersweet thing, It's definitely a movie that I enjoy, but it's also something that has a lot of flaws, and I think those flaws just kind of hold it back for me and put it in B tier. But now, we'll move on to Avengers Endgame, which, of course, goes in S tier. I don't know why I said it like that. Yeah, I mean, it's a great film. It is a great movie. It is the culmination of, the entire MCU. It is great. It does fan service amazingly. I think the time travel is done well. And I think, most importantly, it improves on something that I think is what Infinity War was kind of, one of my complaints about Infinity War. I think it improves on that because since it is a half an hour longer than Infinity War, and since it has half as many characters, and, it's not, it doesn't really have to do as much in the, in the screen time, it allows there to be a lot more moments where the movie can just slow down and breathe a little bit, where it doesn't have to, be sprinting from start to finish. It can slow down. It can really show, the aftermath of Infinity War and the state of the world 5 years later. It's able to kind of sit in that for a little bit, and where, it doesn't need to, go, all right, we're doing time travel, we're doing the time heist, yada-da, we're gonna go and, kind of sprint throughout the whole thing. It's like, you're able to, spend some time, slow down a bit, and I think I definitely like that pace a little bit better than Infinity War, where it's just, again, sprinting from start to finish and cramming a ton of stuff in here, kind of getting a bit cluttered. This one, there's a lot more space between everything. So that's definitely something that elevates this movie more. Definitely makes me enjoy it a lot more than Infinity War, and not a lot more than Infinity War, but like a bit. It makes me enjoy it a bit more than Infinity War, and I mean, I think the time heist is great. I think that they just did, they picked the times that I think were the most interesting to go to, but also made sense for the story. Like, I think it was just so awesome to see, for them to go back to the Battle of New York and, seeing Cap versus Cap. I mean, that was awesome. And then, seeing some Thor the Dark World stuff. I mean, personally, again, I quite enjoy Thor the Dark World, so I thought it was very cool that they went back to that time, with all Thor stuff and getting, letting him interact with his mother again. Which I didn't even talk about that when talking about Thor the Dark World in the last video. The, Frigga's death. I mean, I mean, it's great. I think they do her death very great, and they treat it well, they treat it serious. I really enjoyed, though, that they went back to that time period, and they get him to interact with his mother again, and the whole, he gets Mjolnir again. He's like, I'm still worthy. I think that was great. And then, going back to the 70s, when they have to get the Tesseract and the Pym particles, and creating this moment where Steve could see Peggy through the window, and, setting up that, he goes back to live his life with Peggy at the end of the movie. I think that was great, and also setting up this scenario where Tony can talk to his father. They really, I guess that's kind of thing they do a lot in this. I guess only twice with Thor and Tony, but they do this thing where the character gets to interact with a dead parent. Thor gets it with his mother. Tony gets it with his father. I think that was a great. That was great that they had those moments in this movie. Of course, Natasha's death. Yeah, still not over that. And especially with like, seeing with the Hawkeye show, they really delve into that, the aftermath of that with with Clint, Clint's character after that, Yelena's character after learning her sister died. They really deal with the aftermath of her death. Yeah, definitely hits hard. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that kind of pun. I didn't mean it. Okay, it just happened. I'm sorry. That was done very well. And I think that, when I first saw it, I was like, they should have done Clint. Why didn't they do Clint? It should have, that would have made more sense. But I think, seeing where they've gone now with Clint's character, and, I think that I've come to realize why it had to be Natasha. And I think also, at the same time, it's not so much that I think I know why it had to be Natasha now, but I think I know why it's it works that it was Natasha. I think it would have worked either way. Whereas I think when I first saw it, I was like, it doesn't work that it's Natasha. It had to have been Clint. You made the wrong move. And I think now I'm like, okay, it was a 50-50 shot. It could have been either of them, and either one would have been a choice that would have worked, moving forward in the MCU. There was interesting stuff to be explored with both of them. If it had been Clint, there would have been stuff to explore. And, since it was Natasha, there's stuff to explore. So, I think that I'm more okay with the fact that it was Natasha. Whereas, when I first saw it, I was like, it should have been Clint. That was the, even narratively with him killing everybody, as Ronin, it works. He doesn't have to, you kill him so he doesn't have to deal with the repercussions. But I think now I'm like, that actually worked, that they, didn't have it be Clint, because now you have to have him deal with the repercussions, deal with the consequences of being Ronin, and that's so much of what the Hawkeye show is. So, yeah, I'm kind of more on board with the fact that it's Natasha. But now let's get off that rant and talk about something a little bit more lighthearted, like the fact that Cap catches Mjolnir is an epic moment. Okay, that is a moment that, to this day, like, we're coming up on 3 years later. That is insane. 3 years later. What the heck? How has time gone by that fast? But yeah, we're coming up on 3 years later. And it is still a moment that every time I see it, it just puts a smile on my face. I'm like, yes, he's worthy. Ah, awesome. Okay, so yeah, that is a great moment. And then Tony's death with the whole, Thanos like, I am inevitable and I am Iron Man. Great moment also. Sad moment, a little bit less, triumphant of like, yes, Cap is worthy. This is like, that was awesome, but now Tony's dead. But yeah, I think the final battle of this movie is awesome, and I think that's another thing that kind of makes it better than Infinity War is it still has, everybody coming together fighting Thanos, but it's not so much, it's not like the whole movie, it's not as cluttered, it's this final battle where everybody comes together, and it feels a little bit more earned, and it feels, it's like the epic conclusion of the movie, whereas Infinity War just felt like it's one long final battle. One long third act, which is good in and of itself. It is cool that it's able. I do think it earns that, but at the same time, it just feels like it's just more of a really long final battle than it is a movie. So yeah, I think in Endgame it does it a little bit better with having the big everybody comes together, the entire MCU coming together thing be a final battle, which is so epic. I mean, the on the left moment is great. They use so many callbacks in this final battle. It is amazing. It's definitely is one of the situations where they do fan service absolutely right. So yeah, it's great. It's awesome. I don't think anybody would deny the fact that Endgame is great, and it easily comes in at S tier. I say easily came in the tier a lot, but this one specifically, easily comes in at S tier. If there was something above S tier, it would probably go in that. Anyway, though, let's get into the final movie of Phase 3, the final movie of this video. Again, for some reason, it's not Avengers Endgame. Like, I don't know why they're ending these phases with, like the first phase they did right, ending it with Avengers. For some reason, phases 2 and 3, they're like, we're gonna end them with the standalone movie right after the Avengers film. Like, why are you ending phase 2 with Ant-Man? Why are you ending phase 3 with Spider-Man Far From Home? It doesn't make sense, but nevertheless, that's how they did it. And so, we have Spider-Man Far From Home, which I'm going to put in A tier. Another movie in the MCU that gets way too much hate. Way too much hate. I personally enjoy this movie a lot. I think at the moment I enjoy it more than Homecoming. I kind of always go back and forth as to which one I like better, this one or Homecoming. Right now, it's this one. Right now, it's Far From Home. I like it a little bit more. I think Mysterio is a great villain. Okay, alright, I get the complaint. Oh, he was created by Iron Man. All Spider-Man villains are created by Iron Man. Okay, not true. Now that we have No Way Home, but we'll get to that in the next video. But, okay, sure. Yeah, he was a villain created by Iron Man. He's going after Spider-Man. Again, okay, yeah, sure. You don't have the personal connection to Peter Parker. I'll admit, okay, yeah, you are kind of losing a bit with a Spider-Man villain if he doesn't have a personal connection to Peter Parker, before becoming a villain. But still, I think he's a great villain. I think the idea that, he's trying to look like a hero, and he's tricking people with the holograms, and he created Barf. I think that is a really good concept. I think the scene where it's revealed is really good. I love that they bring back the guy that Obadiah Stane was yelling at about Tony Stark being able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps from the first Iron Man movie. I think that is really awesome that they brought him back here. And yeah, I think it's a great movie. I think that having him, go, traveling on the school trip, being Spider-Man is an interesting idea. And I think that, where people have complained that, oh, we want to have Spider-Man in New York. We don't want him traveling to other countries. Like, we need to have a more classic Spider-Man story. I think now, again, after No Way Home, and seeing, like, where they're going to take him next, and how, the next trilogy is going to be the more classic Spider-Man in New York story, I think it makes me kind of appreciate the fact that, they made this movie, because it was really the only time that they could ever make this movie. Because if they tried to make it later on, now you're really getting into the whole Spider-Man in New York stuff, and it works even less to have him, on the school trip going around. So I think this was the perfect time to have it, where hasn't yet become the classic Spider-Man. I think it's great that they were able to have this, because it is a cool idea. I really do, I think it's an idea that, yeah, it's a cool idea that I'm glad exists. The idea of seeing Spider-Man traveling around the world. But yeah, it wouldn't work later on having him in New York. That's the point I'm trying to make. I think they really do a good job with his relationship with MJ, which, okay, that's another thing that draws Homecoming back for me, is the fact that we know he doesn't end up with Liz, and him and MJ are so great together. It just makes it so, the whole, everything surrounding him trying to be with Liz just falls flat for me now that I know that isn't something that happens. And, okay, yeah, I know, it's like a high school. Obviously, in high school, you're going to have different crushes, and she moves away, and so it makes sense he's going to have a different crush and date somebody else. But it's I don't know, it just, it doesn't hold any weight now that I'm, he ends up with MJ. And it's also, now that you see him with MJ, you're Liz is not great. I mean, MJ's so much better. I don't want you to end up with Liz. That's just, forget, MJ. I'm glad that in this movie they do the whole him and MJ thing. I think that's great. But at the same time, it makes the Liz stuff in Homecoming fall flat for me, where I'm I don't care about this at all. So yeah, love the Peter and MJ stuff here, and I love that they have Nick Fury, or Talos, not actually Nick Fury. It's Talos apparently in the whole movie, but I like to pretend that it's actually Nick Fury in the movie, because it's cool to have Nick Fury in a Spider-Man movie. I think this movie is great, and it sets up the greatness that is No Way Home, which I will get to in the next video. Yeah, No Way Home would not have happened if it wasn't for this movie, if it wasn't for the events of this movie. I think the ending of this is great. The post-credit scene, or the mid-credit scene, is great, where Mysterio reveals his true identity, and you get to see J. Jonah Jameson back. It's amazing. It's a great mid-credit scene, and it's the thing that, again, sets up No Way Home, that allows us to get the greatness that is No Way Home. But you gotta come back in the next video to see where I place No Way Home on the list. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Far From Home. I think it's great. Those are my thoughts on Phase 3 of the MCU, what tiers they go in, and come back in the next video where I place the Marvel projects, not just movies, but now we have Disney Plus shows. So I'll place all the Marvel projects from Phase 4. I almost put up 3. Well, I did put up 3, but I meant 4. I will place them into their tiers. So come back to the next video to see that. But in the meantime, please comment below your thoughts on Phase 3 of the MCU. Maybe give kind of your ranking of the movies inside of it. And remember to give this video a like, or subscribing to the channel, and maybe check out some of my other videos. And with that said, that's a wrap.